All right. Hello, Idiots on Parade, the Too Ugly for TV podcast, bonus podcast. Hello.
Indeed. Good morning, sir.
Good
morning.
It is morning. We're recording on Saturday the 29th in the morning.
Yeah.
It is
My
Garrett
goodness.
Antar Goodwin, musician in New York City. I am Nathan Timmel, mouth clown in Iowa City. I think I'm on this shirt for day 4 in a row now. I like
Nice.
wearing shirts multiple days in a row. I wore this the other day because Iowa City is obviously very small, but it's the number 5 worst place to live right now due to coronavirus spread. All our students came back, and this is a New York Times poll. The New York Times said Iowa City just 1,000-fold percent or something. Or I'm going to make these numbers up, but like in New York City, 1 in 10,000 people gets coronavirus daily, whereas in Iowa City, 5 in 10,000 people, or 50 or so. It's absurd. Like the college students are just spreading the shit out of it.
Yeah. Now, what's your take on this whole mask thing? We don't have to get into it deeply, but I was talking to a guy over in Germany yesterday. Not Todd, but there's my light. Hold on. Let me reposition this thing.
Well, my position my position reposition is just, they say wear it, and I've been to Japan several times, and when they're sick, they all wear masks just because if it doesn't spread germs. And I think what people don't tend to understand is that's what it is if you are sick and you are coughing, the mask catches your germs. It's not like masks are super protection for non-sick people. I mean, they help, but they show those diagrams like, a sick person coughing, it doesn't spread out as much. So, you just to be nice and kind. So I mean,
that's the thing. I feel like there's all these people who are rebelling against the idea of wearing masks. And I find it to be annoying to wear a mask. I don't forget it, but like I get out of my car to go to the grocery store, and then I go, God damn it, I turn back around and I put it back on, I go back in because I forget it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it's oppressive to have to wear it. I do understand the argument that seeing a bunch of people in masks is fear-inducing. I don't really see that.
No,
I see a bunch of people in masks, I'm thinking, everybody's dressed like a bank robber. You know what I mean? Like it's like a fucking 1970s bank holdup movie or some shit,
Well, I felt that when after quarantine, when our banks finally reopened, it was odd walking in with a mask because it says right on the door, "Please wear a mask," and I'm like, this just feels odd. And
put on a hoodie and a nice mask, it'd be great.
Yeah, we belong to a credit union and a bank, and I visited both. In the credit union, you just walk in with the mask and everybody's mask and saying hi. But the bank I thought was interesting because they have a vestibule, and you walk in and there's someone sitting there, and they say, please pull your mask down, face the camera, wait 2 seconds, then put your mask up and go into the bank proper. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's smart.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. See, I went to the bank the other day and they didn't do any of that stuff. We just like walk in, mask on, nobody seemed to give a shit. It's very weird. I mean, I just don't. I'm having a hard time with the mask equals oppression thing.
Yeah, I have.
You know what I mean? Like, not to say that Black people have ever really been oppressed, according to Ben Shapiro and all these other people.
Yeah.
But let's say that some of the stuff that Black people have gone through could be called oppression. I would trade.
I will allow it for the sake of argument.
Right. For the sake of argument, let's just call it that.
If this is the dividing line, we'll put slavery right up to it.
Yeah, exactly. Little slavery,
segregation,
civil rights movements. Right. Yeah.
Separate water fountains. You're close to being oppressed, but I'll allow it for the sake of argument.
Right. Now, here's the thing. The question that I have is, would I trade the German shepherds and fire hoses and billy clubs and bullets and nooses and having to walk to work for 2 years to be able to ride on the bus wherever you want to? Would I trade all that for wearing a mask, right? If they said, listen, all right, now you coloreds just got to wear masks.
Right.
And I might find that oppressive, but I would take that over the dogs, the hoses, the billy clubs, what I mean? It's like, what are we talking about here? Like, come on, like what kind and I don't I don't want to. I know we don't really want to get into not
No.
even the fragility of the millennials, just the fragility of Americans in general. Because I know Russians, Germans, Cubans. I know many Algerians, Japanese people, Chinese people. Like I have relatively good friends in a handful of different ethnic groups who have come from different countries, grew up in other places, and come here. And I kind of watch the way they handle what they call a hard time versus what we call being given a hard time. It's
Hmm.
not even close to the same thing. You know, people. I mean, how my friends from Newark came down to Somerset, where I was raised in Franklin, and saw the projects and went, "These are your projects," and started laughing. Now, you take a guy from India, and I was when I used to teach yoga, he was like, what you guys call poor over here is not even close to what we would call poor in India.
Yeah, they have the
It's not
uneducated class.
right. He's like, it's not even in the ballpark. Like what you guys call poverty here is what we would call living. You know what I mean? And he was being partially facetious, but he wasn't
But really,
really. You know what I mean? Like it's
I
a
mean,
different kind of thing, man. We have a different idea of what of entitlement in this place, and I'm okay with it. Like, listen, do I think this place is the best place in the world? I don't know, but it's a lot better than most other places where I could have been born. But it doesn't mean it doesn't suck. You know
well,
what
I
I
mean,
mean?
the you see these dumb memes on Facebook and Twitter, but they're really goddamn accurate. Where they say, um, I saw one that said because college football got canceled, it pissed a lot of people off, and it said, well, you could have had college football or Applebee's, and you chose Applebee's 3 months ago. I mean, we had the least we had to do. Okay, just stay home, put on a mask, and we can't do that. Those two simple things, and we can't do them. That's what
That's
pussy.
America.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I saw a funny meme that said colleges stand to lose some absurd number of millions of dollars for because there's no football. Said it
Yeah,
looks like football is their business and they just do education as a side hustle. And I thought
so
that
that's
was
it.
pretty funny. I thought that's accurate. But here's
It's
what's
accurate,
funny
but it's
is
also
that
sad because I don't know what's going on at Rutgers, but the University of Iowa already canceled at the end of the year 4 sports. They said because football brought in so much revenue, it covered all the other sports, and the experts said that was going to happen. Said that because football generates so much revenue, it supports Title IX, which is equality for women's sports, and they just canceled swimming, uh, wrestling. I forget, but just nothing to do with football. But it's like, yeah, you can offer this diversity of athletics because of college football, and once that revenue goes away, you realize how much it actually does support the university in other ways. And like it
yeah,
or dislike it, it is very helpful.
absolutely. I hear you. Back to what you were saying, I think it's funny because like back in the day, if you were a citizen, right? You would have to house soldiers in a time of war. You had to vote. You had to feed soldiers if they came by. You had to do like all kinds of crazy things to be considered a citizen, right? And now our only real responsibility is vote. And this is a
We don't
funny
even
thing
do
that right, and that's what I mean. Like somebody said this when it comes to raising children or having students or whatever. If you give them 10 things to do, they might get 9 done. But if you give them one thing to do, 50% of them won't get it done. But if you give them 10 things to do, most of them will get the vast majority of the stuff done. But somehow one thing seems overwhelming when 9 things seems reasonable. Do you know what I mean? It's really weird. And I feel like in this country we're like that. Like it's not even like the communist, socialist like arguments, but it seems like the less the government required of us, the harder what they did require of us seemed to be. Does that make sense?
It does, but
Like,
I want to quick go back to something you said a second ago because I'm not a smart man. Um, housing quartering soldiers, wasn't that
yeah,
one of the things
that was long. I mean, that was a long
no,
time
but that was
ago. But
British. Isn't that one of the things we
yeah,
revolted
right,
against when we got the that
right, right.
I'm not smart. I don't read.
I believe you're correct. I mean, yeah, somebody way smarter than the two of us should fact check that. But here's right. So we fought against all that stuff, right? But do you really think that that's not gonna happen? Like, let's segue into what it is we might want to talk about, right? Because I'll tell you what I want to talk about, which ties into I think what you wanted to talk about. If you still want to talk about the same thing from a couple days ago,
I want to talk about two things that have happened, or three. And
all right, well, let's just jump into it. You go ahead. You start.
Well, I think we're gonna, like you said, I think it's gonna end up in the same place.
Yeah, probably.
So this morning, some just annoyingly bad news. Last night was bad news. Chadwick Boseman, that one hurt. I mean,
yeah, that
came out of the blue, and so
but I do appreciate his privacy. I
thought that was insane. I think that's why it hurt so much. Is I had no clue.
You know what I mean? Right, but I kind of like the fact that he was a very famous person who wasn't in the news all the time and actually lived a relatively private life. Because everybody else, like, you see naked pictures of them running around, you know what I mean, all the time. So it's really nice that he was, like, famous and low key.
Last week or this week, I don't keep track. I'm scrolling through news. It's supposed to be news, and there's an actress from Glee that just had a kid, and I'm like, I don't need to know that. That actress has a publicist that put that story out there. Hey, everybody, my client just had a kid. You should report on. I mean, that's just not news. No reporters hunting down, hey, did that actress from Glee, that show that ended 10 years ago, have it? Like, that's so I'm sure he probably had a publicist, but he wasn't always fighting to get on the cover of People or GQ or be the sexiest man of the year. That shit doesn't just happen. They don't just say,
right.
It's fought for. And in a weird way, and I don't mean this to be funny, and I'm not trying to be a dick, because I was genuinely sad. I liked him. And when I realized I was sad and that I liked him, I also realized I don't really know anything about him because I didn't read him. And he's not, it's not like the days of old where, Bing Crosby beat the shit out of his kids and nobody talked about it. And it was only after he died did you discover that he was just a complete and total asshole. I don't think we're going to discover that with Chadwick, but I just thought it was interesting. Like, I had put forth, I didn't have a story for him in my head. I just generally thought this is a good person, and I'm sad that he's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that holds up. So that was last night. We're straying from the topic. I said I went to bed sad, and then I woke up angry because one of the things I figured we would talk about is Kenosha, Wisconsin. And there was a 17-year-old who took a gun and shot 3 people, killed 2. He was a militia. He said, I'm going to go defend property. So he got arrested, and this morning I wake up to the news that a Christian organization like GoFundMe, and what are some of the other GoFundMes? They're online fundraising, crowdsourcing. People were setting up fundraisers for this kid, and GoFundMe shut it down. So a Christian organization stepped in and said, well, if GoFundMe won't raise money, we will. $97,000 from a Christian organization to defend this kid who left his house to go to another city and shoot rioters. And they're saying, oh, it's self-defense.
And how old is this? How old is this
17.
kid? 17. And how old do you need to be to buy a gun?
Oh, it's all illegal. It's 18 in Wisconsin and I think 21 in.
So again, before we even get deep into it.
Well, here, let me say this.
Yeah,
then the other part of bad news or annoying news, the lawyer that they're going to hire is the same piece of shit. Apparently, he's into QAnon, and he defended, I think his name is Nicholas Sandman, the little asshole kid in the MAGA hat that was with the Native American, that's sitting there like suing the Washington Times or the Post, and he's just suing every news organization and getting undisclosed settlements. And the final thing I'll say, and I'll let you talk, is as wrong as this is going to sound, part of me feels sorry for these 2 kids, the 17-year-old and that asshole Nicholas, because they are just stupid kids. They had shitty parents. The mom obviously bought the Kenosha guy a gun, and, I guess she's militant herself. And, the asshole MAGA hat kid you don't just decide to put on a MAGA hat and go. That he was there on a field trip of little assholes to protest women's rights. I mean, that's why he was there, so he could wear his MAGA hat and say, down with women. Women's bodies are men's bodies, and we.
Well, women's bodies are their own, but men should decide what they do with them.
Right. And so I feel bad in a way for the kids because they're little assholes, but it's not their fault. They were raised to be assholes. It was just shitty parenting. And then again, it hurts me inside. It hurts my soul. It makes me angry that there are people who think they are Christians donating to a Christian. I would give anything for Christianity to be real. I would give anything so that when these assholes show up at the gates, the pearly gates, St. Peter looks at the list and says, no, you're not on here. You don't get in. Look at what you donated money to. Look how you lived your life. Look who you judged. I mean, you took Jesus's teachings and did almost the exact opposite. And so that's why I'm angry.
I mean, literally his Jesus around the water cooler, we call him the King of Peace.
Yeah.
I mean, that's his nickname, KOP, right? He's the fucking King of Peace. He's the great Redeemer, right?
What did Jesus do? Buy a gun, get in a car, drive to another city, and shoot people?
What would Jesus do? Jesus would get his brains blown out by some idiot white kid who's 17 with an AK-47. Exactly. That's what would happen. Jesus' brains would be spread all over the fucking pavement, Yeah. Or he'd be getting fisted by some security guard at the airport.
Yeah,
This is what would be happening right now.
Because history repeats itself. He got crucified by the Romans, and he would come forth today with a message of peace and love and compassion, and the people that say they love him would kick the shit out of him.
I mean, yeah, dude. Here's the thing that, all right, let's talk about this for a minute.
Sure.
I have not looked into the fine details of this Kenosha thing, right? Here's what I know. Little white kid bought a gun.
Oh, that thing. Okay, I thought you were going back to the beginning because we don't know any details because the details change. We'll get into that, but go ahead.
So he shot some kids. What color were these people he shot?
Hunkies, like him. White people. Okay. White on white crime.
Here's I'm going to tie this into something that, and this is where it gets all fucked up, right? For about the past 20 years, easily, or even longer, since I was a teenager, my mother and father would say to me, son, Black people in this country are often the testers for some of the most heinous shit that happens, right? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, if you look at, and they tested out all the RICO statutes on Black drug dealers, then brought them up against the businesses and the Italian mob, right, in the 80s.
Okay.
There were Black people, they would stick the cops on Black folks all the time, students, whatever, it didn't matter. Then they did it at Kent State, right? Isn't that what happened, right? The cops were whooping on white kids at Kent State, right?
The National Guard.
Right, same idea, right? Not cops, but same. I mean, right, okay, yeah. But so
interruption. I didn't know this until I visited Kent State and looked around. I thought this blew my mind, but in retrospect, it made sense. When you grew up and you learned about Kent State, what was said about it? It was, what was the consensus? Like, oh, this happened and it was.
It was bad.
Bad, tragic, horrible.
Yeah, tragic. Yeah, the hippies got out of line, and then the National Guard went too far.
Right.
That's the way it was.
At the time it happened. Yeah. At the time it happened, majority of Americans supported it.
Right.
They didn't think it was that bad. They're like, oh yeah, those hippies shouldn't have been there. It was, it was looked at as well if they hadn't been throwing stones or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They supported at the time. Majority of Americans supported the National Guard. It was only over time as you look back in retrospect.
There's a poem. I want to say the poem is by a rabbi, or by a Jewish scholar, but I want to say it's a poem that you've heard 1,000 times, right? When they came for these people, nobody said
Yeah.
anything. When they came for these, but then when they came for me, there was nobody to stand up, right? Like we know the sentiment. Well, that black people have been in this country the thing that kind of, because our community is smaller, things go through the community faster and they ravage it, right? Like you have crack and it just goes through and just like fucks everything all up, right? And nobody cares. Now we have oxy and heroin and meth, and everybody goes, oh my God, what's happening? But had we put some programs in place during the crack era, those things probably wouldn't have happened. If you didn't just go say no to drugs, you know what I mean? Like if it was just that easy to say no, right? But now everybody wants us to feel bad, but they didn't before. And this is the argument that black people have been making for years. Every black intellectual has been making this argument for years. If not, if you go back to Du Bois and Douglas and people like that, they're talking about 100 years. They're like, listen, when a people has a capacity to do something like this to another person, sooner or later, that person is going to be you, because that's how it works, right? And there's this kind of this dehumanization of black people that has happened in this country. And I feel like now I hear white people saying things like, this race war is coming, I'm going to have to make a choice. Choice? What are you, an asshole? So your choice is say, fuck these niggers and go join a white supremacist group? That's your choice? Because black people are saying, hey, we see some problems here we'd like to see addressed. You're forced to become a Nazi? Really? Like, it's the same. It's like, that skirt was so short, I had to rape her.
Yeah.
Like, did you see the way she was dancing? And that skirt? She was asking for it. I had to rape her. I didn't have a choice. What? Like, like I literally have friends who are calling me up and saying, yeah, this race stuff, man, all these black people running around, but this race war is coming and people are going to have to make a choice. You guys need to calm down.
Well, here's what's funny about it in my mind is all you black people running around. It's generally, as we just said, it was a white guy shooting other white people at a Black Lives Matter protest, and
Right.
it is the like the Daily Show called out Mike Pence very well for Mike Pence gave his "I'm an asshole" speech at the Republican convention and said. He brought up a cop that was killed in California during the Oakland riots. He said, things getting out of control. But what he didn't say was that it was a right-wing militia trying to start the race war who shot the cop. It was a white guy who shot he just sort of makes it seem like it was a Black Lives Matter. It's these, but the real threat is coming from the right. The Black Lives Matter movement, they say that 95% or more of the protests are good, then the sun goes down and it takes 5 people to set off something and then it just gets out of control. And it's young and it's dumb people, and a lot of them are white.
I mean, this will tie back into what you were saying before. I have said this because here's what I will say, and here's what I'm going to say. I have lots of white friends. I know lots of white people. I see lots of posting. I know, I'm trying. I'm trying to show how liberal I am by hanging out with white folks. But I see lots of people posting stuff online, and a lot of it is trying to tell black people what we need to do, right? Like, here's what you blacks need to do in order to, here's if you blacks just would listen, if you blacks would just. And I'm like, I wish that white people would spend less time telling black people what we need to do and then look at the white supremacist thing that is happening. Because you and I have been talking about this for a minute now. Yeah. And I've said many times that I think the white supremacy thing is remarkable. Like, we did a podcast easily a year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. One of the first ones that I ever did where I was subbing for Jake. We talked about this kind of stuff before it was even an issue. And I was like, listen, this white supremacy thing is a real problem.
Because before we even started recording, you and I have had this conversation.
Right. I mean, because here's my fundamental belief: white people have an inability to see the horror of white people, right? Like, if you take something, people will say oftentimes, like, well, even liberal white people will say, well, we understand that black people are disadvantaged because after hundreds of years, after generations upon generations of slavery and redlining and Jim Crow and black codes and all this stuff, right? Like, you guys are just, it's like somebody made the analogy of, like, if we're playing Monopoly, right? And white people get to go 400 turns before black people get to go, and they buy up all the property and do all that stuff, and then say, okay, now catch up, right? What's wrong with you? Are you lazy? That was the analogy somebody made. And I thought that was a really funny one. It's like, you get 400 years of getting to run the board and now say, okay, catch up, right?
We'll
But
take Boardwalk and Park Place. You can have, what is it, Baltic and the
Baltic, right, right,
other
exactly,
one that's
right. You
roped
take
off.
this.
Yeah.
We're gonna cram a whole bunch of buildings into this area. You can stay here, right? And but what's funny about that is everybody talks about the effects of slavery on white people. I mean, on black people,
Yeah.
right? And then they say things like, "Well, we know he was a criminal because his dad was a criminal, even though he was only 13 or 15 or 17 or 19, and he has no record. His dad has a criminal record, and his mom used to do drugs, and we use that to indict the kids, right?" Now,
I see where you're going with this, but unfortunately, what you're about to do is not negate the point I tried to make a little while ago. But I said that the two white kids that are assholes because their parents were assholes. They raised shitty kids.
exactly, exactly. You're out, and but here's the thing: nobody talks about what it would be to be a person who is capable of beating people, going out and daily raping the women, taking your boys out to rape them, hanging people
I was just
in
going
a
to say,
public
taking
square
your
in front of
kids
your
to a
children,
lynching
to a
with
lynching.
like a picnic.
Right, right. Giving your kids rifles to help hunt niggers down, shit like that. What does that do to a people who centuries of that kind of ridiculous behavior? What does that do, right? What is the psychological impact of a group of people who do that and never reckon with it, never deal with it, right? Like we talked about this last week with the sexism thing. I'm well aware of the fact that my mother is one of the smartest people I ever met in my life. Half the most brilliant people I know are women. And yet I still have these kind of latent sexist beliefs that were just drummed into me and baked into my childhood through TV, through everything, right? And I have to work actually really hard. Like my first thought, like, is something stupid, right? I'll see some like attractive female bass player who's got a good gig, and my
Yeah.
first thought is, oh, she just got that because she's hot. And then I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. Like, listen to her, she's a fucking great player. And she sings, right? She sings and she plays well. Like, she got the gig because she fucking deserves it. And she earned it. Like, whatever. Like, my late, but my first response is, oh, she just got that gig because she's hot. And if I don't ever stop to question those things and ever actually do something to dismantle my faulty belief system when it comes to gender, right? It's not going to go away on its own. So my question would be, what the fuck are white people doing other than saying, like, why are the half the white intellectuals running around wasting their time trying to prove racism doesn't exist? Right? Like you get all these guys who are literally trying to prove racism doesn't exist when they could be trying to fucking desalinate ocean water or something. We talked about this, right? There's things we could really be using our brains for. And yet, because I feel like white people have an inability to see, like, again, I bring up the most heinous examples. Priests were raping little boys for years and
Decades.
nobody, decades, right? Nobody said anything about it. The little boys would tell their parents, and they'd be go, no, no, not our priest, not Father so and so, right? Who's sitting there buggering these little boys all day like it's nothing. You have the school shooters. If one of those school shooters was a Muslim kid, what do you think would happen to Muslim kids going to elementary school? If one of those school shooters was a black kid, what do you think would happen, right? Like, they refuse to call white supremacist terrorist acts. They were like, there's a refusal to acknowledge that white people are capable of heinous things. it's like it all gets projected onto the other, which is black people mostly, right? And Muslims. All of the evil shit that white people do gets projected onto us. It's like in a relationship. Have you ever done that? Come home mad? Or you don't do it because you're a dude, but right? Doesn't your wife come home mad and take it out on you? I'm kidding. A little bit of sexist humor there, but like sexism and racism are fun, like boys and girls. But
They
Jamie,
can be.
haven't you ever like been pissed off at one thing, or is
Oh,
there like,
absolutely. And then
or
it
you
affects, it
ever,
clouds your judgment
right,
overall.
or you find some shit that like you don't. There's a part of your personality that you disagree with, right? That you don't want to face up to, but you hate it in everybody else. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? It's psychology 101. You know what I mean?
Let me,
Anyway,
I want to
yeah,
interrupt you quick because we're going back about 2 minutes to something you said about
yes,
you see a beautiful woman and it's a natural assumption of
right.
what you got. That's, I want to segue back into Kenosha because that to me
Mm-hmm.
is something I find very offensive is the absolutes on both sides. On both
Absolutely.
sides. The instant,
Yeah.
um, I don't want to get his Jacob Blake. I feel bad if
Mm-hmm.
I get his name wrong. Okay, Jacob Blake. The instant he gets shot, two camps are created.
Yes.
One, oh my God, he's a beautiful family man and he's never done anything wrong in his life, and he would have been the next Mother Teresa, the male version of Mother Teresa with a penis. And the other
Mm-hmm.
side, holy crap, he has an arrest record. He was the worst guy ever. Look, he has 5 kids with 10 different women. He's a piece of shit. I mean, there's
Right.
no, there's no, can we start with, and it's the same way. So those are the two camps. One has to praise him and say he's the best person in the world, and the other has to demonize him. And it's the same with the police, which is, I can't believe they shot him in the back. I can't believe this. Well, he should have complied. He should have. And there's no middle ground. And I find that I end up in the middle where I want to hear the full story and wait a week. I don't want, like, those cops need to be arrested right now. I didn't watch the video because I refused to, but everything suggests the facts are he was shot in the back. The facts
Yeah.
are he was going into his car. Apparently now the fact is there was a knife in the car, but that doesn't mean you deserve to get shot in the back because you're reaching for something. At the same time, I have done the studies of the police or read the reports or know how they are trained in that. They watch these videos where I think I've told this to you. There's a white guy and a white cop, and there's a domestic dispute, and the white cop pulls the white kid out on the porch, like a kid, in his 20s, whatever, and he's talking to him like, hey, what's going on in there? And the kid just pulls a gun and shoots and kills the cop. And that's shown in training videos, like it can happen that fast. So I get that the cop maybe was scared and they're trained to shoot 7 times. And so, like, it's a big fucking mess, except you have to take your sides. You can't say it was a mess. And by the way, I'll let you talk in a second. I discovered this. This cop that did the shooting, they found an interview with him from 7 years ago when he was becoming a cop. He's been on the force 7 years. And they said, why do you want to be a cop? And he said, because I get to help people when they're having the worst day of their life. I get to go in and maybe make their day a little better. So that means he went into this with the right attitude. He's not the guy in Minneapolis who put a knee on a neck for 7 minutes, Derek Chauvin. What happened to him over the course of 7 years? This is where being a cop beats down on you. I have all these ideas on how to fix policing. I think everyone should listen to me. I have some good ideas if you want to hear them. But it's like, what happened over the course of those 7 years where he went to young, idealistic to, he's been around enough scary situations or stressful situations where he just snaps like, fuck it, boom, I'm panicked, I'm shooting. There's so much to unpack there, and I don't like any of it. The absolutes, the have to take sides, the inability to wait and hear things out, the praise, the insults, all of it. I find it all disgusting, and we can get into my solutions for the cops later, but what are your thoughts there?
I think, and I don't know who said this originally, but you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, right? And I think when you look at what the left is doing, that I adamantly disagree with, the whole idea of cancel culture and all this other stuff. Cancel culture wasn't made up by the left. It was made up by the right. Made up
And
by,
now they hate it when you see
right.
it on the left. Trump last week said boycott Goodyear. I'm trying to cancel an American
I
company.
mean, what did he do? He got into office and he canceled half the cabinet.
Yeah,
Like literally, everybody who disagreed with him got just axed.
yeah,
He
fired.
literally, he was like the cancel cabinet. Like he just literally got rid of everybody who disagreed with him. No, and he still does. If you disagree with him just a little bit, you're just done, right?
The first
But
case I remember of cancel culture, and I'm probably wrong, but that I remember was the Dixie Chicks, and that came from the right.
absolutely,
They were
absolutely, yeah. I mean, and if you go back, I mean, shit, go back to the '60s with all the blacklisting of the Hollywood people
oh,
and the
that's before
directors and the
yeah,
musicians,
McCarthyism and the
right?
Communist Party. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Like, come on, like, and if you go back even farther than that, like being canceled was not being this particular breed of white. If you were Irish, you were canceled. If you were Italian, if you're like
and now that the left is using it, the right is using it as a like, I'm so
right,
angry. Look at them cancel culture. It's like we learned it from you.
exactly. And but I think that here's the thing. I think that what people are really fighting for, is the right to tell. Like, I think when we talk about the concept of white supremacy, I think we talk about it from a concept of Nazis and KKK people,
Right.
not from a concept of white ideas and white definitions are proper, right? If I look at Kaepernick or Black Lives Matter, right? You could agree, disagree with their stance, what they believe, whatever, right? But oh, Kaepernick's against the troops. Really? A soldier told him to do that. Everybody knows that. Like everybody knows that a soldier told him to do that. This is the way to respectfully protest of the flag or the anthem, right?
Wait, quickly, his name is Kaepernick.
Like Kaepernick. Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been listening to right wing people. Like honestly, I've been
Well,
listening
you
to
don't follow
people.
football at all, I know. So,
No, but I've also been listening to white wing people pronounce his name all the time wrong. So it just like I
like they're doing
literally
with, they're saying
with
Campbell now.
I know, and somebody called out Tucker on that, and he blew
Yeah,
up in the dude's face. I'm like, what an asshole! What an ass! But
it's just the biggest piece of shit in the world. But
oh
anyway,
yeah, but like, and I think that what we have is a situation in which like white intellectual thought, white definitions, white everything have been what this country is run by, right? And now people, this is what we're talking about with the vegan thing, right? People are now saying, listen, there's tons of black vegans, there's tons of black vegetarians, there's tons of black this. The notions that get put forth of who people are, this idea of the absent black father and this thing. I will say that I don't know the numbers, but I would argue that maybe they're right, that there are less black couples that are married that have children, right? But the studies also show that black fathers spend significantly more time with their children, spend more time dropping them off at school, doing homework with them, putting diapers on them, feeding them, doing all those kinds of chores. Like
is it
they've done
because
those,
they're unemployed?
probably. Right, exactly.
Racism. He comes in with a racist joke.
Exactly. Right. They've got the free time, you know what I mean? They're collecting those welfare checks. What I was
You
going to
made the
do
same
is,
joke about me. If you remember, when I go to the playground, I'm like, I go to the
no,
playground during the day with my kids. It's me and a
I
bunch of
know.
moms, and they're like, "Look at that dad spending time with his kids. He must be unemployed. He must be unemployed."
Right. Exactly.
So basically, I
But
stole a joke from
yes,
my
I
own
know.
personal life.
Yes. But you know, it's like, but the perception that white people put forth is that this is a black person. And what black people are saying is that no, like you don't get to define us. We get to define us. Same thing women are saying. You don't get to define what rape is. We tell you what it is. We're the ones who are having it done to us. So we tell you what it is. We tell you what sexual harassment is. You don't define what sexual harassment is to a woman from a man's perspective. You don't tell us what we're supposed to be okay with. We tell you what we're okay with. And that's how it is. But like for hundreds of years, it has not been that way, right? Like one group of people wrote the stories, told the perspective, and told it as the truth. And maybe it was their truth. But again, if you tell the story of the Pilgrims from the perspective of the Native Americans, it's a very different story. Do you know what I mean?
I
It's a
did
very
actually
different
listen to
story.
not an audio book, but an audio recreation of that.
Mhm.
Um, It's called Run to the Hills. It was a charm
Yes.
by
Yeah, by that philosophical group
yeah,
from overseas.
Iron Maiden, the
Yes,
English poets,
exactly.
a group of English poets.
Yes. I think part two of that was called Indians, actually, by that band named by
Named after that
the
disease that you put into an
disease,
envelope
right?
and mail,
Exactly.
called anthrax.
Exactly. What was their guy's name? The lead guy. Oh God,
I
what to say? Put him in because they're all
Joey
really
Belladonna, or is that the bass player?
maybe because they're all really short. They're like short guys like me.
I
They're
met
all
them.
right.
I
They're
stood in line to
super
get their
short guys,
autographs,
right?
and I'm just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? I mean, yeah,
Right. Like I was gonna say, you could put them in an envelope and mail them to
they were
people.
tiny
Tiny
people.
kids. But goddamn, they made some good music, didn't they? I dug those
Well,
cats,
yeah,
man.
I'm looking
I
them up
dug
right now.
those
That's why I'm
cats.
looking down right now.
Yeah.
Of course,
I-
the disease comes up first, not the band. That's
of
how
course.
out of favor they are with the world. So
Yeah.
try
But
to
I dug them though. They were fun. There was a bunch of bands back then that were like those heavy bands that I dug. I dug that, and then I dug like the
sure.
the the,
Nope, Joey
the
Belladonna was the drummer.
yeah. Okay, makes sense. That sounds familiar enough to be accurate. Yeah, that's funny.
I guess he's not
But
singing for him anymore because I'm not finding the name I rec.
yeah,
Oh, where's the? Jeez, they've got a lot of members go in and out of this band. All right, I got to look up the Wikipedia list of Anthrax members. Good podcast here, everyone. I'm looking at my phone, just looking up an old metal band from the '80s. I know they're still around, or I just stopped listening to
I'm
them in
sure
the
they
'80s.
are.
Okay,
Yeah.
members: Scotty and Charlie Benanti, yeah, Frank Bell, and Joey
Oh yeah, that's
Belladonna.
it.
Yeah,
Okay, nice. Yeah, they're fun. I dug those cats. But yeah, I think if you hear, and again, I would say this, like if you look at the voices of women, of people of color, of all kinds of people, you'll hear, if people would take the intellectual voices from not just one group of people, right? Like if we actually really just like could see that this country is like what's the term? What do they say? It's like filthy with intelligence from different places. Like we're overrun with it and we don't use it. Like if we just I want to use the term data mine, and I don't know if it's the correct term, but I want to and a smart person would just data mine all these communities for the best and brightest
that
and
sounds
then
about
put
right
them in a
for the way you're
room.
describing it.
Yeah, I think it's the right word. And then put them in a room and say, listen, we need to solve these problems because there really is a different perspective, right? Like, not everyone in this country has the same perspective. And you and I can both go see a movie and we can watch the movie and we can have two different experiences and both leave and give a review and both of us be right, even if they're polar opposites, right? Because there's not a truth here, there's a perspective. And I think that what people are really asking for, not asking, demanding at this point, is inclusion in writing the story, right? Like I was talking to a friend the other day and we are talking about like people in your life, right? You have people in your life and you have the story of Nathan, right? That's your story, right? The book of Nathan, right? And every person that you interact gets to write a little blurb in that story, even if it's just the cashier. You interact with the cashier at a grocery store, that person gets to write a one little line in your story, right?
Tell you
But
this: the cashier's going to say nicer things about me than my friends.
right, probably because they don't know you. But
Exactly.
like,
They have these pleasant little 1 minute
right,
interactions, like, "Oh, he was
right,
very charming to me. He didn't treat me
right,
like less than just because I'm a
right,
cashier." But then the people that know me are like, "Oh, he's a fucking asshole." And he can
exactly.
put on a nice face in public because he doesn't want to be
Yes.
rude to people. But
But like, the people who are close to you, like your support system, they actually help dictate how the story goes. You know what I mean? So you have to be really careful who you choose to be around you, right? I think that like one group of people has been in charge of the story of America for a very long time. And their story, their version of it is not accurate. It's told from one perspective. It doesn't mean that their perspective is wrong for them, but it does mean that the stories that everybody else has to live into to be part of their story, right? The American story, as told by one group of people, the person I have to become to fit into that narrative is not actually who I am. Do you know
well,
what I
the
mean?
problem I
That
have
makes
with that
sense?
It does, but I don't agree with the one thing you said, which is
Hmm.
it, where you said that the story is not wrong for that group. It can be wrong. Yeah, the white
Sure.
people can say, like, well, the manifest destiny, we had to kill the Indians because they were on our land. That's
Right.
wrong. There's no difference.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't,
Yes.
and when
Sure.
I say that, I don't say that from a white liberal guilt, I feel bad point of view. I don't feel bad at all. It happened. And I want to, I don't mean this to be glib. It's in the past.
Right.
Can we do things about it today to make up for it? Absolutely. But do I need to get on my hands and knees and grovel and say, oh my God, this happened?
No.
No, but I think
No.
that's the difference is I think there are too many liberals today who are like, who was that idiot? I think it was Rosanna Arquette who said, "I feel so guilty. I was born a white woman or born white or some shit." It's like, oh, just get over that shit. Can we just come to a point of pragmatism? And this is the past. What can we do to make up for that past to make things better today? Like can we just
I
keep moving
mean,
forward without ignoring the past, but also not feeling like that we have to commit Harry Carey because of our past? Like, oh wow, we did this. Let's just
yeah.
leave the land and turn it over to everyone else because we got it unjustly. It happened. Let's make up
I
for it and
mean,
move forward.
right. I think my argument would be if you look at a place like Germany, and now I again fact check this because the hell do I know about Germany, right? But my understanding about Germany is that while there's still a right wing, there's a new resurrection of the right wing over there, and
That's
they
in
have
Europe, not just Germany.
yeah, and they have some real problems. They have problems over there, but the way that they handled their treatment of the Holocaust was to literally have museums talked about it, put it
Right.
in the books. Have Germany has like a 3% African American population, or just black people, colored folk in general. I believe I don't know for sure though. And there, if you look at their ads, there's like there's like mixed race babies up there. There's black children. There's Asian children. They have all kinds of children represented in their ads. They have all kinds of like you can find black Barbie dolls and fat Barbie dolls and skinny Barbie dolls and curvy ones and like they don't do the same thing we do here. They just don't do
And
that.
meanwhile, and I listened to a series of podcasts over the summer about this, but any African American cultural museum or any museum of slavery and what that is created and fought for, and I don't want to say privatized by black people. I mean, the
Right,
government
exactly.
rarely
Right,
gets involved and says, "Oh, hey, let's set up this monument, this honor,
right,
this remembrance of." It's just sort of like we don't have time for
right.
that. It has
I
to be done
mean,
by black people to say, look what happened to us.
right, because white people have this idea that if we don't talk about it, it will go away. Let me ask you this. You've been in relationships before. Does that ever work?
So
Right,
far, one.
right, right. But
this
do you
this
mean like
last one seems to be doing okay. The first
right,
three, not so much.
right, but does it really work to like pretend that the problems that you have inside of your relationship and to just not talk about them and see if they just magically go away? Does that
Uh,
ever really work?
uh,
Right, like
exactly.
you know what I'm saying? And
That's
if
why
we
this
can't
relationship works. This is the first one with honest dialogue. I could go through and tell you all the
right,
other ones, but there's no point in reliving.
right,
But it took to this. I remember full well, like the first. I don't want to say fight we had, probably fight, and just the idea that we talk about communication and misinterpretation, and we fully admit that at our worst, and we have a discussion. It's like, okay, this has been building for 2 weeks. Why haven't we talked about it? Whereas the relationships that failed, we didn't talk about anything until boom, it's over. Like it just
right.
like, where the fuck did that come from? Oh, it was
Yeah,
a year or 2 years, or just ignoring the problem until it went away.
right.
And
Yeah.
hopefully you don't think that's what I was saying 2 minutes ago. I'm not saying,
No,
I'm saying it was in the past. Let's
no.
acknowledge it. Let's say
Absolutely.
it happened,
Absolutely.
and let's make it right. I just don't feel
And
guilty about it.
and
I don't
here's
feel
the
bad.
thing, right? Like if we talk about this stuff, if we segue this back into, and then we'll segue back to your initial question, um,
I don't
which
even
is
remember what
like,
it was.
but like, here's the thing, right? Like, I'm not mad at myself for being sexist. I understand that it's not my fault. I was trained. Like, literally, I was trained. I watched TV. I watched James Bond. What? No. Okay, fine. And then he lays her down and fucks her. And I'm like, oh, right. That's how you get laid. You smack
I
her
thought you were
twice
going
and
to
you
say
fuck her.
you're not mad.
Right?
It's not your fault. You watch Good Will Hunting and you realize it's
Right.
not your fault.
Right, exactly.
Which goes to what I said about the two asshole kids, the Nicholas
Right.
and the not their fault. They were
Exactly.
raised by
I
fuckheads.
mean, and this is exactly it, right? Like, we have to, at a certain standpoint, learn to see the humanity in the other, right? If white people look at black people and see black people as animals, right, not as human beings, which is really what slavery was. The justification for slavery was that black people are not human, right? And to understand the horror of slavery, and then
Is
that's
that
probably
BB your end or my
yeah,
end?
it's on my end. It's a
Okay.
dehumidifier. It's gonna stop in a second.
Oh.
Um,
I looked at my dehumidifier one and started beeping. I'm like, because
right,
mine's been making noise this entire time,
yeah,
like little trickles of water, and it sounds like someone's peeing right next to me. And I keep thinking every time it happens,
that's
how much of
funny.
that is getting picked up by the microphone? I won't know
That's
until I play
hilarious.
this back.
That's hilarious. Um, yeah, I heard something like that in my earphone, and I was like, "Where's that coming from?" Because it sounds like water going down a drain to
Yeah,
me
that's what it
doing the
is.
thing,
And
right?
I turned it
Yes,
off well before we started, so it should have just drained once, but for some reason
right.
it's still going.
That's funny. So, but like, I really do feel like my conditioning is something that I can overcome. I feel
Yes.
like if you are a white person, and this is the argument that white fragility and all these people, all those kinds of authors are making, the people who write those books, the argument that they're making, which I think the argument may be correct, but their approach may be wrong.
I was going to say,
The argue,
snake oil salesman.
right. But the argument is that if you grow up in this country, you will naturally become white supremacist in the sense that really like if you take the average white person, how many books have they read by black intellectuals by choice, or not by choice? How many have they been forced to read by the institutions that they were educated by? Like, very little, right? Like, how much real black intellectual thought did you read? How much high intellectual thought for women did you read? How much of that stuff did you read in grade school, right? And the answer would probably be zero. Like,
I don't think I
you
read
had
anything until I started taking African or American college, when I went out of my
right.
way to take a few black
Right,
courses.
right, exactly. And then you learn shit that you're like, why didn't I learn this? I could have learned to fry chicken and eat watermelon years ago. No,
I learned that I was the only white person in the classroom again. I'm like, hey, this is
right?
just like my childhood. I remember this. Now I'm an adult and I'm the only white person.
Right.
It was always interesting. I'm not going to lie. When I would show up and they're like, you're in the right class, cracker? And I'm like, oh, I'm here. I just took it because I thought it looked interesting. I'm not trying to be, like woke or, that guy from Forrest Gump. It's just the government, Jenny. It's the fucking government. I'm just here to listen, like
Well, but here's
I
the
got a kick
thing.
out of that too. They're like, oh,
But
look at you, white boy.
right. But you have a handful of black friends. You like some black music. You've read books by black people. See, here's the thing. I would argue that my knowledge base is enriched heavily by the work of people who look like me and who also don't look like me. And it gives me a much deeper appreciation of the place we live when I can see other people's perspective of it.
Yeah.
So if you watch, you know what I mean? And I feel like I get a more complete idea of it. And yet we have an idea that you can have a really myopic view of something, and that's okay, right? You can have one source of information, and that's enough to tell you everything from
And that's
one thing, and that's not okay, right? It's like you do yourself a disservice as a nation by not taking advantage of all of the other things that this nation has to offer intellectually, technologically, like people who are just good at things in a way that you're not, or have a different way of seeing something that you don't have, that actually could really benefit you. Do you know what I mean? We
well,
don't
that
have
that
that,
that's my
That's a
problem.
real problem.
That's what goes to what I said about when the Kenosha shooting happens. You
Right.
immediately divide. This guy was a
Right.
saint. He was the best father in the world. He loved all three kids from all three women, and I think that's the case. I don't know. I mean, but and oh no, he had three kids from two women, and he's a horrible criminal. He, like, there's no. It's you immediately go to your corner and you demonize or you lionize, and there's
Right.
no middle ground, and that's the problem because
Absolutely.
of information and points of view, and it's. And I hate to bring this up again, but I will say it anyway. I highly recommend anybody and everyone reads the book "Talking to Strangers" by Malcolm Gladwell, because he breaks down
it's a good
some
book.
things. He breaks down.
Yeah.
It opens and ends, and he pissed a lot of people off by talking about miscommunication and the Sandra Bland case and what happened there. And he doesn't pass judgment, and he got a lot of flack for not saying the cop is bad or Sandra should have listened, or he tries to break down what he thinks actually happened.
Yeah.
You step back and read it and you're like, this is fascinating. Uh-oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Hi, buddy. What are you doing? All right, big mess where both my kids, who I dutifully put in front of a movie, because that's good parenting. Like, okay, watch this and ignore me. Good parenting. Came downstairs. So the last thing we had sort of said, and then it got messy, was read Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes, Malcolm Gladwell.
We were talking about single source information is where and the problem with every year the FBI lists right-wing white supremacist groups as one of the biggest threats to the American nation, and that's it. It just sort of goes away. It's like the FBI says this is a real problem, and everybody goes, "Oh, that's a real problem." And then, but look what these Muslims are doing. They're getting radicalized, and then that's squirrel. We get our attention focused over there.
No, but why do we refuse to talk about how little white kids are getting radicalized in the evangelical church? Why are we not right? Like there's something that is happening, and it's like it feels like victim blaming to me, right? Like, well, these black guys are saying their lives matter, so now we need to run around and get guns. It's like, how is just black people asking to like? And here's the thing. Here's what I don't understand. Right? Again, there's a ton of white. There's a couple of black intellectuals: Thomas Sowell, McWhorter, Coleman Hughes. Then there's the obviously I don't like to use the term intellectual, Ben Shapiro's of the world, right? People like that.
I don't think he's intellectual.
He's not. But like
with his voice, with his speaking voice, I don't know how he became a podcaster. And I know it's exaggerated, but it's like, who can listen to that for an hour? He has this.
Yeah, and it's also just really fast. It's like he talks to me. He sounds to me like a used car salesman who's trying to get something over on you, right? The way he talks is the way that like bullies talk, or like if you grow up in like battle rapping or something, like they throw a bunch of shit at you that like confuses you and overwhelms you, and then you try to pick a point, and it's like he has really nice
challenged, he loses, so he doesn't get challenged, so he just keeps talking.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but like I feel like there's a lot of time and emphasis put on how black people are wrong and how racism isn't really a thing and how all this stuff is fake. And what I would like to have the white intellectuals say is, hey, listen, I understand why you think this is really happening, because the news is portraying this and this and this and this and not all these other things. So let me explain to you the ways in which I understand. Like, what did Obama say? Well, if I watch Fox News all day, I watched Fox News the other day, and wow, if I watch it, I'd hate me too. And it's like, right, single source information, right? Like if you only listen to one source like that, you get one thing. But why aren't the white people who are trying to say how racism doesn't exist? Why aren't they just saying, we understand why you think it exists because your news media is portraying it like this? But here's what's actually happening. What it sounds to me like is, you guys are a bunch of fucking idiots. This country's the best it's ever been. What are you, lazy and stupid? The only reason you can't get ahead is because of this. And if you didn't. It's like, whoa, okay. Now, I will admit that to a degree, I'm tired of white people telling black people what to do. So I would like to tell white people what to do, right? Which makes no sense, right? But
All
I
right.
would like for white people to focus on the white supremacy issue, because that's a much bigger issue than black folks saying don't shoot us. Do you know what I mean? And like the people who said pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, that was like 5 people who said it. And now that's the narrative. All cops
Right.
are bastards. Like all cops are bastards. I promise you, no black person wrote that. No black person came up with that slogan. And then no black person runs around writing all cops are bastards. It's not even language. It's like what Chappelle said. Isn't that nigga from Empire? That doesn't sound like something a white person would say. That sounds like something I would say, right? About the
I have seen meetings and groups and like in Minneapolis where there was some really, and I don't want to, serious hatred against the police. And it's like,
yeah,
we're running out of time. So there's but yeah, it's not saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is innocent when it comes to their
no,
views on police. I can't speak for the movement, but it's a back and forth, and both sides seem to be butting heads instead of speaking and
I,
listening,
I,
and that's the problem.
but I think that if we go back to the history of the police, the history of the Second Amendment, the history of all this stuff, the Second Amendment came into existence because when they decided that Congress was going to control all the guns, right? The people went, well, we can't have our slave patrols then. That's
Yeah,
literally what it is. We can't have our slave patrols because the slaves outnumber us down south.
and that was
So
the
we
first
have to
police
have
group
guns.
was
And that
catching
was the
runaway.
first police force.
Yeah,
And that police force turned into another, it just grew into a different police force, into a different one. Now, the roots of it are absolutely slave catching and hating black folks. And you can't argue that up through the 60s and 70s, it was pretty much the same. Police were used to, like, the kind of policing that went on in white neighborhoods was not the kind of policing that went on in black neighborhoods,
right.
right? Regardless of the crime rate and all that other stuff. And if white people are going to argue that Planned Parenthood is a bad idea and abortion shouldn't be a thing, because Planned Parenthood started off as this horrible institution that was trying to sterilize black people, which, from my understanding, is the truth. And their argument is because it started that way, it is now a corrupt institution. But the police started that way, and it's not a corrupt institution, right? It's like, come on, man. Like, we all saw Serpico. I mean, I didn't see Serpico, but
I haven't
still.
seen it either. I know it's Al Pacino, but I
but
never saw it.
but you know what I mean? Like why? How did this? Like, I think that after Rodney King was killed, there was a rash of those cop shows because nobody
Rodney
like.
King was not killed; he was beaten.
Okay, Rob, you're right. Sorry, when he was beaten on, you're right. You're absolutely right. Well, after they beat Rodney King up, and the police had a bad thing, there was a rash of cop shows in the '90s that all came out. Remember all this, right?
Mm,
Like that wasn't a thing before that. They just rebranded, and now 20 years later, like they spent the '90s rebranding the cops, and now 20 years after that, after the rebranding process, everybody forgets that we watched the Dukes of Hazzard outrun the cops and hate the cops, and now all these white folks like, yay, cops.
yeah.
It's like, what
Smoking
happened?
man,
Like,
the cop was the idiot.
right. Like, what are we doing? And I'm not saying cops are idiots. Some of my best friends are cops. I have them over for dinner all the time. But like, but you know what I mean? Like, I know cops. And I know that people are human beings. And I think that we need to learn to see the humanity in people. But I do think that there are problems that I wish we could address. And I wish it was okay to address them in our own houses. Like, I wish white people could deal with white people, and black people could deal with black people, and we could then come together and deal with each other. I really wish that.
By
I don't
the
know
world of
what.
coke.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Well, let's use this.
Isn't that what Miley Cyrus wanted to do?
No, that was. No, I'm doing
Not
the old
Miley.
song. I'd like to buy the
Right,
world a
right.
coke.
But wasn't it? Which
It
one was
was
it?
one of
Jenner,
those.
Kylie Jenner.
Yeah, I was
Kylie
gonna
was
say
it
it was one of
her?
those Jenner
Right.
idiots that gave a cop a Pepsi.
Right. She stopped the revolution. She saved the planet by giving out a Pepsi.
All right,
Maybe
so
that's what we
let's use
need.
this to close things out. I had said in passing I could change the police force, and this goes back to the kid in Kenosha who said, "I get to help people when they're having the worst day of their life," and then he shot someone in the back. And what happened over the course of those 7 years? Like you said, I know cops too, and when you talk about humanity, they see the worst of it. They are dealing with crime. every day. Like whatever it is. Did you watch? I apologize right now. I apologize for using Hollywood as an example, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. Did you watch No, I'm drawing a blank. The first season of the Matthew McConaughey, Woody Harrelson, True Detective. Did you watch that on HBO?
That was the second season of the show, but
No, that was the
their
first
first
season.
season.
Woody Harrelson. Second
The
season,
first,
Vince Vaughn and I forget.
I thought the first season was two other guys.
No, first season was Woody Harrelson,
Was that
Matthew
the one?
McConaughey.
Which one was the one with the Blair Witch Project looking things?
That was the first season.
Okay, I did see that.
So there's a line in there where Matthew McConaughey asks Woody Harrelson, "When did you stop being a cop and become a private detective?" And Woody Harrelson says, "I showed up to a domestic dispute, and there was a baby in the microwave." And he said that was just it. That was his snapping point, you know. And they do a shot from like the cameras inside the microwave, and Woody Harrelson just opens it, you know, like. And that's the shit cops see all the time. They see domestic abuse, they see the violence, they see kids being abused, they go to rape scenes, they go to murder scenes. Cops see the worst in humanity all the time. And after 7 years, you're so tense, or you're so done that a guy doesn't listen to you, and either you're angry and you shoot him, or you genuinely are scared and you shoot him in the back because you think he's going for a gun or not, whatever. After 7 years, you snap, you break, something happens. So my solution for cops is not defund the police, double the funding, double the amount of police, and then it's 1 day on, 2 days off. 1 day on, 2 days off. Pay them well, because right now, I guess, one way they get money is they work lots of overtime, because when you get more overtime, you're more stressed, and yeah, the money's good, so pay them. Give them a day where they go out and they help the public, and then they get 2 days off to decompress and be humans again, and not have to deal with someone that was just raped, try and arrest a rapist, try and get a kid out of a home where he's being beaten, and more cops, better and those 2 days. So maybe not 2 days off, 1 day on force where you're acting with the public, 1 day off, and then a day of training, whether it's weapons training, or I heard this recently. I thought this was fantastic. Every cop should be like a black belt in a martial art, so that way they don't feel the need to go for their gun immediately. But so give them the tools to be better humans. 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day of training, and just hire more of them, so it's not the same overworked people, so that you can take that good kid who says, "I just want to help people," and allow him to be a good human being that
absolutely
doesn't snap after 7.
Let me just throw this out there while we wrap up. One, I think you have a valid point. I think that if we look at police and we just take away the violence that gets perpetrated on black people by police, right? Let's pretend that none of that exists, right? You still have rampant amounts of domestic violence within police households where they can't take the stress. They come and beat their wives and children, right? You have situations where they're rampant alcoholics. The drug abuse in the police community is massive because it's a fucked up job. But at the end of the day, I don't give a shit, right? Like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care. Like, I care because I care about police because they're people. But if what we're saying is, like, I think your solution is really valid, right? My solution would be something very similar. Like, listen, you get a certain number of years, and then you're automatically bumped up to detective, or you have to go to detective or desk duty, because after 5 years on the street, you can no longer be on the street, right? Like, it does something to your brain, and you can't do it, right? You watch all the cop shows, and I'm sure that they're just TV shows, but there's always a rebellion against going to see the psychologist after a shooting. I don't need to see the psychologist.
Yeah, right? Make that mandatory, where once a month.
Right, but they fight it.
Right? But make it mandatory. Say, look, if you want to go into the office and just sit and not talk to the person, fine. But you like talk about it. But so it's they fight it because they think it's a form of weakness. Where if they're the cop that goes to the therapist, so fuck it, you all have to go. Now it's not. What you're saying is correct.
Right.
They take it as I can
Right.
take
It's
this.
like,
I'm strong. I'm a cop. So
right.
no, it's not you going to the therapist. You're all going.
Right. But that's the problem, right? Like, it's funny. Like Katie and I did a duo gig yesterday, and I had to set up all the gear by myself, right? Which I hate. Like I had to set up the PA, load it all up, do all this. There's no sound for this place, and so we had to bring all this stuff, and it's just me and her. So I'm like literally doing all this work, and I'm annoyed. And she said something,
How'd the gig go?
and I might, oh, it was fun. Gig was fine, but
Okay, so she said
I
something.
think right, and I might have snapped at her. She accuses me of snapping at her, and I may have, right?
Well, I
Right.
mean, she's a woman, so she's naturally sensitive. You might not have snapped. She might have just taken it that way.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say, but but you know what I mean.
Two for
And
two,
the
racist and sexist
right,
in this one
but
podcast.
right, but I feel like, and then the situations like that, like if we take a simple situation like that, right? Now imagine if I shot somebody, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't deal with it, and then I went home. How does it come out, right? How does unexpressed, right? Like in this country, and I would argue this is a man thing, right? This is where sexism comes to bite men in the ass, right? How racism fucks white people all day. Here's how sexism bites men in the ass. Sexism gives men no access to our feelings other than anger and happiness and lust and humor. Like we can laugh, men can laugh out loud. We can want to fuck all day. We can get angry, right? There's acceptable emotions, right? But if a man is sad and one of his parents didn't die, he can't cry, right? If a man is angry or sad because somebody said something that really hurt him, his feelings got hurt. It's like, well, men shouldn't have to just man up and be okay with that. And it's
Lydia
like,
makes
well,
fun of me all the time. First time she saw me cry was when Robin Williams died, and she hasn't seen me cry since.
Right. Exactly. Right.
And
right. But that's the problem, right? Like when men have emotions, the society, women as well, like they smack it down. Most people don't want their significant other to have these kinds of feelings or something. And I find a lot of times that if you're a cop and you're a dude and you go through all this heinous shit, there is no release valve.
right.
Other than the drugs, the alcohol, and the beating up of your family. It's
Yep.
like there's no men have no access to remaining quote unquote masculine and then still having feelings. We're taught to suppress them, hold them down, and then if you become a cop, you have even more pressure to not to be this way. You know what I mean?
To be
And you can
stoic
see it
and
in people's faces, right? I've seen it in cops' faces when you can, and again, I'm like mind reading, which you're not supposed to do, right? But like you see some of these people where the guy's like, well, why do I have to show you my ID? And you can see the cop will do something like this. He'll go like he'll go like, because it's the law. You need to show me your ID. The guy goes, well, I wasn't doing anything. And the cop goes,
well, this
sir. You know what I mean? Like, what is like? You can see the rage building up. You know what I mean? It's like,
and this
why
goes
is the
to what I
person getting
said.
so mad to that?
This
You
is
know
the
what I mean?
breakdown in
Right.
talking to strangers. It's what
Yes.
Gladwell breaks down is the interaction between the civilian, Sandra, and
Right.
the cop, and how miscommunication led
Absolutely.
all of this.
And I thought Gladwell did a great job because he said that cop was the guy who pulled everybody over. He pulled people going over 2 miles over the speed limit. He pulled you over for a handful of reasons, and he did that all the time. So he's just an anomaly. Now,
Well,
and I
not really,
read the book.
because he pointed out that was a new department thing. It's like, oh, we can turn citizens into checkbooks.
Right, exactly. And the problem is, and here's the thing that I would find most insulting about that is when it happened in Ferguson and they went and uncovered the police corruption, they were basically using the black community as an ATM.
Yeah, that's
literally the black community was an ATM, and so like, but nobody.
That's happening all across America now. Is that they're
Right.
basically, and it's not just the black community. It is.
It's any person who has no agency.
Yeah, it's you just pull them over, and if you're rich, you write the check because you don't care, and if you're poor, you get fucked. But either way, you're writing a check. You're
right. Exactly.
All right, now we're getting off topic,
really
so let's
bad. No, but yeah, we can wrap up.
That's
But to close out, I will say this: I agree with you that the Kenosha kids were brainwashed, right? They were brainwashed in whatever way. They're radicalized in whatever way people get radicalized. I just don't understand why we don't think the evangelical church and Fox News and half these people need to be held accountable in the same way that we're trying to hold the Muslims accountable. I don't blame this kid for what he did because he honestly thought he was doing the right thing. Like, this is that point of view. Can you be wrong? Like, can two people have a point of view and both be right? Or can two people have a point of view and both be wrong? Do you know what I mean? Oh, but you know what I mean?
I am not sure about that. She just had a fever. I don't want.
Her mom and dad said that they were fine.
I don't trust her. So
The
neighbors were sick yesterday with a fever, and everybody got coronavirus tested, and everybody's clear. But the fever, I don't want my kid getting sick in general. I was like, oh, they're fine. It's a long story. I'll tell you off air.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't understand why honky Americans can't step up. And my hope is things are changing, but my worry is they aren't. So antargoodwin.com, nathankimmel.com. I don't have anything specific to plug. So
I'll be playing at Bernie's. Katie and I are playing, I think, Trio, Bernie's Hillside Tavern, September 4th in Hillside, New Jersey.
I'll put
Bernie's Hillside Tavern, Hillside, New Jersey. It's going to be a fun gig. We always have fun at that place. I love Bernie's, so we always have fun there. So yeah, come on out if you made it this far into this. So there we go.
Cool. And then I think I told you, did I put this on the bunch of my tracks were accepted off my last album on Sirius XM?
That's awesome, dude. That's so fun, man. How cool is that?
I don't know if we put it on air, if I just told you aside, but if I'm repeating myself on air, great. If not, then yeah, if you have Sirius XM, the comedy channels, find out how to, I'll look it up and I'll put on the bottom the email address. Request me on Sirius XM. If you've made it this far, send an email and say, hey, I want to hear some Nathan Timmel on Sirius XM. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, watching, doing whatever.
Yeah, good times.
Bye.